Recently, the Palm Springs Kiwanis Club had another great speaker. Let's listen in.
I thought that today what we do, if you don't mind, is everybody's pretty much aware of what's going on in the stock market right now. It's going to the moon, pretty much. Has been since President Trump was elected. We haven't really had much of a correction or a pullback in equities, although at the same time the bond market is performing pretty well also. If you look at your bond investments from the beginning of the year until now, they've risen in value, number one, plus you've been earning your interest payments on your bonds, so that you've had a pretty decent total return in the bond from your bond investments. But naturally, all the excitement and the action is in the stock market. And there's where to invest, how to invest. Do we just throw the money in there and just, since everything's going up, what's the difference? Should we be investing in FANG stocks? That was our Facebook or Amazon or Netflix or Google, you know, those types. As a matter of fact, they're coming out with a new fund within the next week, I believe, called FANG. F-A-N-G is going to be the symbol on it, and it's a combination, it's a little mutual fund of these types of stocks. So generally in this business, when things start getting a little frothy, all these novel types of investments are created to attract more money. The FANG is one of them. The next one that's coming on the way is Bitcoin. I don't know if you've been hearing about that. Well, actually, it's been ramping up probably in the last 2 weeks, although it's been happening for, the last 6, 7 years, but really caught on. Big reason for that is the fact that all of the central banks around the world, it's the old Jimmy Durante. Everybody wants to get into the act. So they're all printing money. Started by our central bank, and then the Bank of England, the Bank of China, and the European Central Bank. They've all begun printing money. So everybody is doing the same thing. And they're flooding cash into the market to the point where there's no other place to invest pretty much except in stocks and bonds, and primarily stocks. So that how long does this continue? That's the question that needs to be answered and figured out. That's my job as far as managing my clients' accounts. But, some of the strongest areas of the stock market right now are the financials, the banks, number one, but credit card companies are doing pretty well. We also have insurance companies that are doing pretty well. And with the situation with the Federal Reserve Bank raising interest rates or proposing to raise interest rates, they keep telling us they're going to, but they never do. They're afraid of bursting this bubble, in my opinion, but that we've got an interest rate increase coming supposedly next on the 13th. I think that's next Wednesday. And the futures market is telling us it's pretty assured that they're going to raise rates. And that will probably be fine for this time around. But there's an old situation in the stock market that it's called 3 steps and a stumble. You might be familiar with that one. In that when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates 3 times, the 3rd time is the stumble. 3 steps, 3 increases, the 3rd one being the stumble, which tanks the stock market. So something to be aware of. You can put that arrow in your quiver so that you are knowing what, it looks like the new person is going, Gordon, I think his name is. Is that the new fellow that...
I'm trying to keep score still.
Yeah, I think they're going to approve him, though.
Will this be the 3rd race?
Well, This will be the second, if you want to be, I'm looking at it kind of like the first because they're proposing, the Fed is proposing to raise interest rates 3 times next year. So if they do that, I'm anticipating the second one being the problem child. But we don't know. They kept telling us that they were going to raise interest rates last year, this year, last year, and they did, but only one time. So that didn't affect things too much. The reason that eventually the rising interest rates compete with stocks, so that most people would rather take their money and invest it into a bond where, number one, you're getting paid to lend money to a company or the United States of America, but then at the same time, your capital, your money is protected. Whereas, in the stock market, you've got fluctuations and changing valuations a lot that as we get older, we have to be careful of that because we want to try to maintain the value of our investments and the money that we have because we're not going out to work anymore. But with that, the Fed is supposed to raise a few times next year. And if they do that, that offers competition for stocks. Whereas, if you're going to be able to know what day you're getting your money back, your maturity date on your bonds, and then you're getting paid while you're holding it, that's pretty ideal. The only problem these days is that the interest rates are so low, you're really not getting rewarded for even taking the risk of lending your money to the United States government or corporate America. So we're on the other end of the spectrum there. Another thing that's developing is that there is what the Fed looks at and what a lot of investors look at. It's known as the yield curve. And that is something that you've probably seen graphs where it's got, for example, the 2-year interest rate, the 5, the 10, the 30. And it should look steep. It's starting to flatten. And as it flattens, that generally is an indication that there's a recession around the corner. So that, and this is where the big tug-of-war is right now because there's lots of investors that don't believe that we're on the verge of a recession because you hear, hey, Trump's been in office, everybody's bringing money home, they're building businesses, all kinds of people are getting hired, and at the same time, the yield curve is flattening. You would think that with all that activity going on, that it should be steepening, and that the economy should be in a state where we're just kind of really getting ready to ramp up and have some big years ahead of us. And that's not to say that we're not going to, but these are the types of things that are in the market right now that are causing a little consternation for traders, investors, that type of thing. But as we get through the year, it looks to me like we're going to have some slow growth, but we're going to also have monies coming from one sector to another in the market. That's kind of how they're trading. Just recently, everybody's been hearing probably how the technology stocks have been doing extremely well, and that just in the past 3 or 4 trading sessions, a ton of money has come off, been sold. Those stocks have been sold. The Googles, the Amazons, all those guys, they're getting hit pretty good lately. And that money's coming out and going into the retailers. If you recall, Amazon said, we're going to sell everything to everybody now. So all of the retailers, their stocks just really got destroyed. And now they're coming back because investors see there's a lot of money in the market already. So it's and you keep hearing there's all this money out there, but they're selling one sector, they're buying another. Generally, that's indicative of there's not a whole lot of money there for investment, and they're not going into their pocket and paying for the stock. They have to sell this to buy that, to sell that, to buy that. And we're probably at a point where you need to be a little careful. So that's why I like the area of the bond market right now. Even though yields aren't all that high, you can still, if you want to conserve your capital, you can invest in bonds that maybe mature in 2 or 3 or 4 years. And then, by then, we should be on an upswing where interest rates are then going to be rising, and then we can then set up portfolios so that you can ladder maturities, and as they mature, when you reinvest in higher interest rates. So that's kind of where I think things are going. I'll open it up to any questions you might have.
I collected some questions before you started speaking. Someone wants to know if they don't have the money to be in the stock market, they want to spend about $100 to buy one share of stock just to watch it every day. What would be a good company?
That might be, I think one of the hottest stocks, and it just keeps mildly climbing, is the Bank of America. Bank of America has been, just from the beginning of the year until now, has returned about 30%. That's conservative compared to some of these others there you hear. Geez, they've doubled, they've tripled already. Something like that, or say J.P. Morgan. That's a good quality bank. They pay a good dividend. And we're in an atmosphere now that if the Fed raises interest rates and embarks on a higher interest rate environment, then that's good for banks. They've been washed out for years, and now with interest rates, they'll be able to make more money. Yes?
Do you have any comments that you would like to share on the proposed tax bill?
To me, it seems like they should get it passed and have something on the books and then start tweaking everything from there. But get it through versus nothing. If you have nothing, then nobody gets any kind of a break. But if you can get something through, and you hear all of these reports, it's for the wealthy, it's tax breaks for the wealthy, blah, 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 blah. You hear that every single time. But there are things in there that, to me, if you give corporations a tax break of 20% instead of 36%, there's a big chunk of money there that can be put to work by hiring people and putting everybody back to work here in this country. That will increase the taxes that get paid, and it should help us very much. So to me, it seems like that's the way we should go. Just get it through and then tweak it as we move down the road.
Isn't the Federal Reserve driven to keep the rates at an absolute minimum so that the payments on the national debt are lower?
Well, that's one benefit of it. But eventually, and that's something that's very scary. I've thought about that many times, that they've kept it down for so long that, you see the debt. $21 trillion, and if rates go up, the debt service on that is going to choke us.
A lot of money.
Yes, and I'm very afraid of that. Yes, but I don't know, nobody's doing anything about it. Everybody seems to think that I'll be out of office by the time that happens, so I won't have to deal with it.
They don't have a mortgage payment to pay on the national debt.
Yeah, I mean, it's the credit card balance that just keeps going up with no end in sight. They're hoping that by generating a lot of, if they get the tax law passed, they'll bring in enough revenue to pay down the debt. But, when do politicians pay their bills back? I mean, to me, I'm a little cynical about it because that's just what I've seen over the years. They just keep running the bill up. These guys over the tax bill, they were suddenly, they were spending like no tomorrow, and then all of a sudden, some of these guys, especially on the Republican side, they're suddenly concerned about the national debt and the the debt balance that we have. I mean, it just is a game that I'm glad I'm not a part of. But
Tony, thank you very much.
thank you very much, and it was just fun. Thank you.
For more, go to KIWANIS PALM SPRINGS.org.